I want to talk a moment now about science, the sacred, how this affects your brain and your being, and even your own spiritual evolution. In the past recent years, science has been showing more and more how there's actually a place in the brain that can experience spirituality. For example, Professor Jordan Grafman from the U.S. National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke in Bethesda, he's identified several areas of the brain that are involved with religious belief. Now, these are areas of the brain that are unique to human beings only. And what his findings are indicating is that human beings have evolved, they've adapted to become religious beings. And his research is supported by Dr. Andrew Newberg, a professor of radiology, physiology, psychology, and religious studies at the University of Pennsylvania. And he says that the way the brain works is so compatible with religion and spirituality that we're going to be enmeshed in both for a long time to come. Now, if I remember right from Psych 101, the professor talked a bit about B.F. Skinner. And B.F. Skinner said something to the effect that if somebody had been raised not knowing of a deity, not knowing of a God, not knowing of a religious study, they would still have an innate sense that there was something greater than them, something more powerful. Granted, that could be their own experience of the parent taking care of them, nurturing them, or it could be just a psychological expression of what these brain researchers have been finding. And now another interesting little piece here is a chemical called DMT. Some people have been calling this the spirit molecule. And this may be a chemical that is responsible for religious and spiritual experiences. Now, I personally don't have any experience with exogenous DMT, that is, DMT that's not created within the body. But I wonder if we haven't all encountered a bit of naturally occurring DMT from some time. Let's just take a moment to talk about some of this terminology so we're on the same page. An exogenous chemical is a chemical that you put into your body. This is like a prescription drug, a street drug, some sort of external chemical that you ingest. Converse to that is endogenous chemicals. These are chemicals that your body creates naturally. And it's good to note that exogenous chemicals only work because there is a receptor in your brain that can accept the endogenous version of that chemical. That means for every drug taken, including DMT, there has to be a natural chemical that the body already creates. If it wasn't, the exogenous chemical would not have an effect. Now, typically, endogenous chemicals are easier on the body and the mind. You can create them at will and stop them at will. They can't be made illegal. You can't have your body regulated in that way. They're completely natural and safer to use than chemicals you put into your body. And now I want to create a further analogy of endogenous and exogenous chemicals, but take that into the realm of sacred experiences. And please remember, this is just an analogy, just a metaphor to help you understand where I'm going with this. Now, we've talked about that your brain has evolved to experience spirituality and religion, to have sacred experiences. And that in order to do that, there has to be certain chemicals created by the body and receptors in the brain so that you can experience those sort of things. That means, just like it sounds, there is an endogenous source for all religious experiences. And now, please be aware that I'm not saying that any of the sacred experiences that you had were not real, just something in your head. I'm actually going to show you that it's the opposite. Because for many centuries, certain organizations have made a figurative and literal killing, convincing people that religious experiences can only come from an exogenous source, their specific exogenous source. This is an exogenous source that they've given shape to, they've given their own form to, they built temples, composed songs, and then they thrust those images upon other people, sometimes forcefully. And in this modern era, many of us have already been exposed to these exogenous sources and maybe have made the mistake of thinking that those sacred experiences can only come from an external source. But remember, with our analogy, that if you have had a sacred experience from an exogenous divine source, such as a god, a spirit, demon, anything like that, you now know that there is a divine endogenous source that's actually more beneficial and even more powerful for you. Now, these endogenous spiritual sources, these endogenous divine beings, have had certain names given to them, such as daemon, holy guardian angel, higher self, dragon. Perhaps you've heard of some of these. And so this is the purpose of my work going forward. I want to help people become aware of exogenous divine sources. These are constructions that they've allowed to influence their own thinking, their own feelings, their own beliefs. And then I want to help people get in touch with their own endogenous divinity, their own sacred self, the Atman, the Brahman, so to speak. And what this will do, it'll allow you to become fully aware and fully transcending as your own sacred being. And you'll be just like any other exogenous sacred being, but sacred in your own way, just for you. And note, I did not say that this would be a process of rejecting other exogenous sacred beings, because when you're ready, you'll find that it's easy to take your place as an equal among them. Now, these other exogenous sources can be constructs like egregores, or they can actually be other evolved sentient beings like you. And when you learn to work with them, you can communicate and you can work with them in ways that are in accordance with your will, not their will. So stay tuned. I'm going to be doing more videos pertaining to this subject, as well as the books that I'm writing now, all center around this subject of apotheosis. And yes, all of this work is going to have a very strong Norse perspective to it. We're going to be using the runes and other elements from Norse lore. So, in the meantime, look inside and wake up.